All right, welcome back to another Photoshop Gym episode. Now we're gonna be doing basic compositing. Now, if you look on the screen here, I have the finished work of the gospel artist Nicole C. Mullen. This is a mixtape cover entitled "Stronger." There she is, sitting in the church, smiling, being confident in herself and in God. And basically I just used two images. If I can bring up my file, here is, let me bring it up for you real quick. Here is Nicole by herself, and I have a picture of the church. Now if you notice, the church picture was a little bit too saturated, but I desaturated it in the Photoshop PSD file. And you can notice the details of the rim light and the glow and the matching colors and whatnot. But we're going to show you how you can do basic compositing using the same picture of Nicole but with a different background, which is this dark grungy wall here. So everything is in layers. As you can see, there's the one for the stronger text. Here's another one I did for some highlights. But let's get to it. Here is the pictures, right? This is the background and this is Nicole. Now, depending on your subject, sometimes you might want to use a pen tool or even channels or the magic eraser tool, depending. Now in Nicole's case, she's on a brown background, so for the sake of the tutorial, we're gonna be using the magic background eraser right here, and I'm gonna sample her skin texture by holding Alt and click once, and I can start to brush away the background from Nicole while preserving her hair and her image. Now it won't be perfect, guys, but this is a way to start off cutting out your subject. Now remember the three main guidelines in compositing artwork in Photoshop, right? You have to make sure the colors are matching. You also have to make sure the perspective is there, and the saturation, the darkest part and the lightest part has to match up. And that is what helps a great deal in getting the forefront or the foreground image blending with the background image. So I'm taking my time here. I'm trying to move a little bit fast here. I'm just going around the edges and brushing out Nicole's hands. What I'm gonna do, I'm gonna leave the hands there for right now. Let me zoom out. I think for this image, since we removed the brown background, I'm gonna get the pen tool and I'm gonna draw slightly and trace the leg and take out the hand, because the hand looks a little weird. The hand looks a little weird, so I'm gonna be deleting that from the scene and giving a little more better look on the subject. So here we are. We have a picture of Nicole. I can still see some little spills. Let me quickly get rid of that. Okay, now if you analyze your subject and the background, what I can see automatically, they're pretty close in blending. But I can also see that let's let me remove this right here. I can also see that we'll need to make some adjustments in editing this photo. So here's what we're gonna Control J. We're gonna duplicate the background, and we're gonna call that background. I'm gonna drag it to the top. I'm gonna go on filter blur, Gaussian blur, or let's use average blur better. Switch the blend mode to color, and I'm gonna bring it down to let's say maybe about 40%. As you can see, as I turn it off and on, it takes away the saturation from Nicole and adds the texture from the background. So this is already a step forward that is helping us blend the background with the foreground. So to do a quick cleanup, I'm gonna go on layer matting and go and remove white matte. That can help at times. The fringe and color decontaminate. It helps clean up the edges somewhat, depending on your images, right? So we have a decent cutout there of Nicole. So here's the first thing I'm gonna do. I'm gonna create a new layer, and I'm gonna call this rim light, and I'm gonna pick a contrasted area and sample it in the brush. Or let's use maybe a white color. We're gonna take down the brush opacity, so maybe about, let's take down the opacity to about 50. I'm gonna right click, create a clipping mask, and if I brush alongside of Nicole's hands, you can see a little bit of action happening there. Switching it to soft light, we can create some highlights on her skin. So we're gonna be real careful just to hit about the edges, maybe on top of her hand by there. Carry down the opacity of the brush, maybe about 50%. And here we can start to create some interesting highlights on Nicole. Now, how much should you do this? You have to experiment and know by feel how many to add by how much of the brush, right? It has to be a soft edge brush. Let's drop the opacity a little bit more, and there we can create interesting highlights on the subject. And that's all in blending in soft light mode. I can even go maybe about a side of the face, maybe on the earrings, ear that are well contrasted. That is how we can make our highlights pop. So I'm gonna show you another move that we can apply also in creating a more blended cutout. I'm just gonna get rid of the edges there, and I'm gonna bring in back the brush. Now also, what you can try, if you go on effects and the blending option, you select the bevel, you can see we can also create somewhat of a slight glow around Nicole. Let's play with the depth a little bit. Let's bring down the size, maybe about there. And also you can mess around with the inner glow. So bevel is doing one thing. We started from there to here, and we can create another layer and call this rim light 2. We can switch the blending mode to linear dodge. Get your brush and bring down the opacity maybe about 30%, and then we can experiment with the edges, or you can also reduce the opacity of the blending mode to about 50%, and then we can try and create some blend in Photoshop. Now, doing this kind of stuff takes time. You have to experiment with the blend modes as well. If something is not looking good, you can always try a different tactic. So in this case, we're going to try and harden the brush just a little bit and play around with the edges. Now, why do we need rim lighting and highlights? Because it blends and gives a more realistic feel of the picture. So here we have Nicole. Now we're gonna do another technique. I'm gonna select her cutout. I'm gonna go on select, modify, expand. Let's scale that to 2 pixels, and we're gonna select the background layer. We're gonna make a copy of it. We're gonna command click, select, modify, contract about 5 megapixels while hitting the delete button. That will give us a good outlining as well for this cutout that we're trying to match here. So if I take out, let me switch this to screen. There you can see a beveling look around Nicole. By using the layer mask, we can minimize that and blur it out to give it a realistic wrap, or light wraps. So let's do that real quick. I'm gonna mask out the ones around her shoulder and then ones at the side. And I'm gonna go on image adjustment levels to bring her tone out a little bit more. Let's do that. And I'm gonna select the background layer, levels, darken it a bit. And to be creative, if she is stepping down in front of a wall, you might want to create the shadows as well. So we can do that by simply selecting our brush and bringing the opacity down, let's say about 20%, and draw that in as well. So let's go ahead and do that. Basic compositing techniques to give your photo manipulation a real feel. So I'm gonna drag that's gonna be behind Nicole, and I'm just gonna draw in a little bit of the shadow. Now you might see some spills and bleed around Nicole due to some of the edges wasn't cut out clearly, but you can see what I'm teaching you today, which is the basic compositing, right? Taking your subject and blending it with the background. I'm just going to use a layer mask here and mask out some of this spill. and then you can get creative as well and put your own text. I'm just gonna type in let's type in stronger. But obviously this takes a lot of time, but with great practice you can make the best of your artwork. Here is a font. And there you can have a good polished cutout. It's a rough one, but this is the basics of creating a manipulation artwork such as this one here. This one took a little bit longer, but you can see that the details and the rim lighting and such along with this as well. So that's it, guys. We're going to catch you on the next one. Support our new YouTube page, DYS Recording Studios, and we're going to be popping up more tutorials on Photoshop and the joy of manipulating photos.